Okay. All right, we're on.
Great. So thank you so much for coming on to this very exciting talk. I asked Alice to partner with me because I've been selling a lot of real estate for the past several years, and I have noticed a pattern that's happened, and that has to do with different people's assumptions of their significant other halfway through the deal. And I started to ask myself, wow, I think this is a critical topic. And Alice will tell you why as we move forward. But my name is Darcy Elman. I'm a real estate agent with Compass Real Estate. I hang my license in San Francisco at 1699 Van Ness. I sell real estate. I sell residential real estate and commercial residential in San Francisco, in Marin, Sonoma County. I move out into the peninsula a bit as well. My passion in life as a realtor is negotiating fiercely on behalf of my client. I just love negotiating, but when it is possible, and also I love helping couples and families build their wealth and reach their goals and have the greatest life they can and the money to do it. And I believe real estate is a great vehicle for that.
And I'm Alice Shikina. I am a mediator. I mediate divorce and family conflicts. I'm also a negotiator. So I coach people on negotiation, and I also negotiate for them whenever there's a need for that. And my passion is helping remove people from conflict and all the conflicting communication that they're wrapped up in, and setting them free so that they can continue on in an uninhibited manner in their lives. So I'm really excited to be working with Darcy because we are going to be talking a lot about communication today.
So one of the things that, I've got to move my windows here because I have to see this slide. One of the things that families and couples and that I started with is assumptions and miscommunications. And whether you're leaving a rental and starting to buy real estate, or whether you have family property and need to sell it, and have siblings to interact with, or it's just you and your girlfriend, or you and your boyfriend, or you and the family, it's often what I find is that when one person handles the money, that's the person that often calls me. And so it's not uncommon for me to start talking to someone about a purchase or selling a family home without ever interacting with the spouse or the other partner until, about a quarter of the way through the deal. Often I ask, can we have a meeting with all of you, that's going to be impacted by the sale, but the person running the show or handling the finances under the roof usually assumes they know he knows or she knows something about what everyone wants. And I'm here to tell you that many of my deals have had have gotten very strange through the center of it, because the other person comes forward and says, I never even wanted that. And so here's what I'm thinking in this call. I wanted to talk about building your wealth and understanding what you're doing, short-term and long-term goals together, you and whoever that together is with, is either going to bring you closer to deeper intimacy, or it's going to expose a gap that's already been going on, and it's going to get wider in the process. So we're hoping to, kind of educate you so that your future deals bring you closer to your loved ones, as opposed to create more of a gap. I'll tell you first, number one story that's happened to me not too long ago is I got a call from, it was a couple young, and the boyfriend had money, and he was like, he had gone to my real estate investment made simple class. He wanted to buy investment property. And as we started looking at investment property, he was really excited. He was pre-approved. He had everything ready. And then we finally had his partner come in to look at everything that we were going to make offers on. And she's like, no way, I would never live in any of these places. Okay, that should tell you something. We are 3 months into looking at property, and I had no idea that his partner had a whole different set of criteria that she really hoped in her heart that she was going to achieve in where she thought she was moving. He was going to buy, a single family home with an attached granny unit, or a single family home and a cottage somewhere where there's a rental income coming in. She was fine with that as long as it met her criteria. The situation went very strange because then we had to start filling out paperwork, and how was she going to be on title? And not only that, then what we ended up with, they ended up with a great house, no question, but it was not what we were looking for. It was a single family home in an environment. I mean, we had been out for could you imagine 3 months every weekend, right? So, in the end, what we found was something very different than what we started with. And that's not uncommon. So there are many more stories, but the idea is to understand what's happening before you jump into looking for real estate. And I'll let Alice take it from here a little bit.
So what you want to do, whether you are the partner who is going out and looking for real estate, or you're the partner who's like, okay, that's fine, do what you want, come back to me when you're getting close to purchasing something. Before all of that even happens, you really want to sit down together and talk about what are your investment goals. Do you want to buy in a neighborhood that's still up and coming so that you can increase your wealth exponentially, even if the place is not in a very good neighborhood? Do you want it to be in a place where you want to raise your family? How important are the schools? On a scale of 1 to 10, where would you place school as the most important? You can even dive a little bit deeper and ask, of the schools that are in that area, where is your cutoff line? Meaning these top 3 are okay, but this 4th school, no way, don't want to do it. So you really need to dig very deeply with each other, with your partner, to find out what are your expectations? Are you expecting to sell this in 5 or 6 years and turn a profit? Are you expecting to keep it for 20 years? Are you expecting to keep it for longer than that, maybe passing it on to the children, right? So you should really ask all of these questions of each other, because frequently people say, hey, we're going to go buy something. And that sounds really exciting. And that's about where the conversation ends, until where Darcy says 3 months later, they decide, oh, wow, we're not on the same page. It's because these conversations have not happened. You don't want to assume that your partner, just because they want to buy something, that they have the same goals that you do. Just because you get along, just because you love each other, and they say, hey, I'm going to go out and check out some real estate, you cannot assume that they have the same goals in mind. More often than not, you will have different goals and you have not expressed them to each other. I can't tell you how often it's happened in a mediation where people thought that they were on the same page about certain things until I started asking deeper and deeper questions, and it turned out that they were not on the same page at all. So we talk about facilitated conversation, and what is a facilitated conversation? A facilitated conversation is a conversation that you can have with a third party neutral, so someone like a mediator. And I don't call it a mediation because it really is a conversation. There's just someone there to ask questions, the questions that you may never think of, right? Like about the schools, or you might want to find out, how far does each person want to commute? And there may be multiple variables. And so you might determine, well, I only want to commute 10 miles, but schools are really, really important. If I can get the best school, I'd be willing to commute 15 miles, right? So you want to be able to adjust these variables, and you won't know this unless you talk about it and you lay out on the table what the different variables are.
I mean, I want to jump in a little bit too, because one thing you're talking about that I think is really important is, let's say you have a big house, and let's say where you're living is just it's not working for you anymore. And your partner is like, all we need to do is redesign this house. But the reality is the other person is like, no, it's time to move. We need to make a change. Or let's say in the school situation, you might have 3 kids, and the private school that she wants to send the kids to is really expensive. That's going to shift how much money you're going to have to buy your house. It's going to change the dynamic. So I just wanted to jump in there because those are really important goals.
Yes, definitely. And so, yeah, all of those different things have to come into the conversation prior to actually even looking for any real estate, because where you look, as Darcy can tell you, will be determined by those particular things that are important to you. So back to the facilitated conversation. So these are good for particularly highly charged or emotional conversations. A lot of times when people are thinking about investing and looking into their future, it could be that it's pre-children. It could be while you have children. It could be after your kids move out and you want to invest something, after after you become an empty nester. So all of these different things can move people to be very passionate because they're talking about their future. And many people have very strong opinions and ideas about how they want their future to look. And if you're not in agreement with your partner, it can feel very threatening and challenging. And so because of that, sometimes people have a difficult time moving through these conversations because people are either yelling at each other, or they're interrupting each other to make sure their idea wins over the other person. Or they may even stonewall and just say, you know what, if there's gonna be this much argument, I'm walking out of the room, I'm not having this conversation. A good facilitator keeps everyone in the room calm. They help people hear each other. And a great facilitator can catch misunderstandings and miscommunication as it happens in midair, because you can see the nonverbal communication. You can see people getting upset when they shouldn't be. So this facilitator can just rephrase what was said by one party so that the other party can actually hear it. So this is what is sometimes a really good thing to have in the cases that you find yourself in, where you're like trying to figure out an investment and you're like, this is getting too much. Like, we're arguing about this and we're too heated.
So let's talk a little bit about what it means to, jump into investments and taking your hard-earned money and putting it in the real estate market, either whether it be commercial or whether it be for passive income, rentals, or buying a single family house just for yourself. The current market in the Bay Area, I'm going to be specific to the Bay Area, is really kind of on fire right now. And what's driving the market, I think a lot of people it's hard for people to understand this, but what's driving the market is the rental market. And I'm saying that because for the first time in our lives, we're all working from home, and our home is serving multiple purposes. It's serving it's a school for our children. It's a playground, if we even have an outside, a playground for the kids. It's an office that we work out of. If we see people and we're on Zoom all day, then it's a meeting room, a digital meeting room, and then it's also our personal space. And you have to ask yourself, when it comes to communication with your significant other, and this has been happening, what's why the market is kind of on fire right now, is because most people are looking around and saying this is just not enough space. And that, in combination to be the tech industry saying that we're not going to have anyone even come back into the office till well into 2021. So people are saying to themselves, I bet I can work home for half a week. I don't actually need to be so close to the office. I can actually buy more for my money outside of San Francisco, or I have some money and I'm going to buy a second house for the kids and I in Sonoma or Napa. Napa's on fire. Sonoma's on fire. Marin has outperformed San Francisco in the past 2 months. There are multiple offers in the East Bay and in Marin and Sonoma and Napa. So if you think about the rental income being a little bit weird right now, because if people are losing their jobs, they're being allowed to furlough their monthly rent. What's happening is that landlords who are a little bit older are saying to themselves, do I need this? And so there's a lot going up on the market just because people are saying, I don't want to be a landlord anymore. So that's all driving all those rental issues are driving people to sell. Renters are, yet again, the house they're living in is being sold out from under them. They're jumping in as first-time home buyers. People with money in the luxury world are saying, let's buy a second house. The ultra luxury is saying, I can get the best deal I'll ever get. They already have income. They're buying as well. So normally we don't see all those markets doing well at the same time. And we have that right now in the Bay Area. And we are in a little bubble, but that's what's happening. Planning for the future, short-term and long-term goals. I'd say this is the beginning of the conversation. If you're sitting on this call and saying, well, I don't know where to begin with my partner, I just don't know where to start because he does not like to spend money. Let's say that's the conversation. Or he already bought an investment property and he got totally screwed. I hear that all the time. People call me and they're like, we're really afraid to buy. We lost money about 10 years ago. Well, I'm gonna say in that moment, you may want to have your money work for you in the real estate deal. That would be a good moment to go to Alice, because one person is terrified, another person's go, we've got the money, let's do this. Those are two very different states of mind. And if the person who's afraid can't speak, doesn't know how to actually language their emotions, then it's, the rift gets even bigger between them. What would you say, Alice?
Yeah, for sure. Typically, if someone is afraid, they're just going to mostly just say, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And they're not going to dig very deeply to find out all the reasons that are driving their fear. So if you are the person who's dealing with someone who has that fear, who is blocking your desire to purchase real estate because they're afraid of losing money and that sort of thing, it's super, super important to listen. Instead of using the agenda, your own agenda, which is let me try to convince this person to see my point of view, what you really should do is say to yourself, let me see if I can listen well enough to understand what is driving my partner's fear. And so you want to ask questions such as like, what are some of the things that are making you afraid? What are some of the current concerns that you have? What are your hesitations? And then when they tell you what their hesitations and concerns are, then you should mirror it back to them so that they understand that you have heard them and that you understand what they are saying, right? So you'll say, so from what I understand, you're concerned because, and then you say whatever it is that they said. So you want to use the mirroring technique in order to get at their fear and make them feel heard. If they don't feel heard by you, you will never stand a chance of getting them on your side. So that's the first thing you have to do. Instead of coming at it as, let me convince them, let me like be the cheerleader for my side and tell them how great it is, you need to change your tactic. And the tactic should be more about listening, mirroring, and understanding.
Yeah, can imagine that, you're sitting in one place seeing that this is possibly a door opening to a better life, right? A better home, but even if it's just investment property and you're going to buy a 2-unit building, or even I'm really big on single family homes with a granny unit because it's a lot of income coming forward, just under one roof. And your partner is absolutely stonewalling you, it's going to bring up your own anger. And sometimes if you call a realtor can actually ground the whole thing in just the numbers. Let me tell you what that's going to look like financially. And that might also be a way in to beginning to have a conversation about, is this a good choice for the two of you as you start to really ground in, look, this is what the data is. This is what, what it's going to feel like monthly and what income you're going to be bringing in. So I would say that it brings up, start to build your team, begin to thinking of that you're not alone in it. Your family is not alone in moving forward, building wealth and investing. Financial planner is really important. Alice being a mediator, really important, and a really good realtor. So I said that rentals were driving the market, and I love this. You're already paying a mortgage; it's just not your own. Renters are smart. Landlords are selling. Renters are buying. They're sick of it. They have the money. They're going for it. They're figuring out ways to get a loan. People in tech may never go back to working in an office, and families need more space. And you can see by this slide, I'm going to move this down. You can see that the rentals are still even the $3,000 realm in 2020, you know, I mean, it's still, they're starting to go down because people are buying. And now even in the second quarter, they're dropping even more because people are getting out of rentals. So we are going to talk a little bit going forward. Sorry, I have to move this. Having a little technical moment here. It's a seller's market. I don't know if anyone knows what that means. It means that there are so many people out looking and ready and pre-qualified that there are multiple offers coming in, which can be very frustrating. But you know what? A good realtor is going to widen the area in which you're looking, and it's going to help you to get into a house. And imagine if you were giving someone $4,000 a month, or you were investing it in a mortgage at $4,000, your house was appreciating. And you might say, well, if there's multiple offers, I'm buying at the top of the market. Why would I want to do that? Excellent thought. And I would say this, that if you can get into a house that's going to serve you, and it's going to work for you for the next 10 years or even 5 years, isn't it better to be, because eventually you're going to sell that house and you will recap your money. And I can say that with a little bit of confidence in the Bay Area, because we are not middle America. We are providing tech, you know, I mean, we have so much industry that's running the world, which is tech, that our markets have stayed strong and are strong. If in the COVID pandemic, we can be as strong as we are, I don't see us going down that much. Although we'll see, I just really don't. So I think so what's really driving the market's interest rates, we are now at 3%. I'm closing on a deal tomorrow with an investment, a person doing an investment piece of a property up in the Santa Rosa area. She's getting 2.8%. I mean, that's insane. So it's a great time to jump in the market, because with the lower interest rate, you have more buying power. You can get more for your money. Your monthly is not going to be as high as it would be at 5%. So here we are. This is really that nut of the conversation that we're in. I'm going to let Alice take it over.
So whenever you are making a purchase such as a home, and you are working alongside your partner and you're discussing whether you're both going to buy it together, or one person's buying it together, or one person's buying it and both people are going to be on title, whatever you do, whether you talk about it or not, you're going into a business relationship, and you need to be aware of that. In all of my divorce mediations that I do, many people went into a business relationship and never discussed it. And guess what happens when you get a divorce? You have to break up that business relationship, and it's a lot messier when you've gone into it without planning, right? So you need to think of each other as your business partner. It's critical. So when you're about to consider purchasing something, you have to have those conversations. If one person is going, let's say you're not married, and one person wants to go buy a house, but because they're in love and possibly they're going to get married, they're like, I'm going to put you on the title. Well, you need to consider that one person is taking all of the financial risks because they're on the mortgage, and then the other person is not putting up any money, and then they have half the title. They have half the house, right? So they're owning half of it. Are you okay with that? And it's really important, as much as it's not romantic to think about if there was a breakup, it's really important to think, at least to take a look at what that would look like if there was a breakup. So no one really wants to imagine that if you're in a strong and healthy relationship, if you're in love, but you really need to do that in order to protect yourself. You don't want to go into a business relationship with someone without talking about the fact that it's a business relationship, and then make a lot of mistakes. And then later down the road, when it does fall apart, like it's either a big mess, or you might end up losing a lot. Right? And so you want to make sure that you protect yourself. You don't want to be in a position where you have to buy everything over again. Your half, their half, you have to buy it back, even though you're the one that paid for the whole thing to begin with. So then you're ending up paying 150% for something. Okay. So when is a good time to start talking about titling? I want to get to that, but I want to pass this on to Darcy so she can talk about holding title.
So there's an interesting, very unseen subconscious um, mind. It's the we mind of a family. And I want to say it because I forgot to say this is a really interesting story. And it really hits on two people being in business together, even though they have kids and they're a family. Because the reality is that, like I said from the beginning, when one person handles the money and is maybe the alpha in the family, they're the ones that I normally interact with. And last year, I sold a luxury home. And last year, I interacted with a lot of CEOs. It was just somehow I just had that was my pattern last year. I just kept attracting men who were CEOs in businesses. And this one very lovely guy met me at an open house, and he ended up saying, yeah, I want you to be our realtor. We're selling. I asked him many, many times, I'd love to meet with you and your wife. I'd love to hear what she's feeling. And what happened was, when we put the house on the market, he told me right away, I want to get this much. I need to get this much from this house because we're leaving the country and I've got to buy in this other country that we're moving to for business. And it's very expensive there. And I was like, absolutely. Let's see what we can do. Ran comps. We got the house ready. It took us about 5 months to get the house ready. That's how long it was beautiful, but they were insistent on making a beautiful house even more beautiful for the new buyers and hopefully getting their top dollar. So what happened was that when we started to put the house on the market, the wife came forward and was like, well, I run this house. And it became this weird challenge of he was like, okay, these are the days, you're going to go in and do open houses. And she was exactly like, absolutely not. You're not going to be in at all. I have friends coming over. I've got, a group coming over that day. And it became this very odd, weird type of relationship. And it was odd because their house, the minute I put it on the market, tons of people were interested in it. And I had her being frustrated because her goals of selling the house were not his goals. He wanted to get it sold, rent it back, and have everything done. And her goals were like, well, no, I have parties planned. I'm leaving the country. I'm taking all the kids out. We have all these relationships and I've planned all these parties and everything. We can't sell the house right now. And I never knew that until the house went on the market that week. So why I'm saying this is because if that couple had come together and talked about timing, what his needs were so that he could feel comfortable and move forward, it would have been a lot easier. But fast forward now to the current day, and let's say you're in a couple relationship and you're buying property together, and the first thing you want to ask is, how are we going to hold title, right? Because if you bought it alone, you would be holding it. Like I bought my first house. I was married, then I got divorced, and I paid my husband off, and I held title in servility. Fast forward, I'm married again. I bought several houses with my new husband. I still hold that the title of that first house in servility within a trust, which means that if my husband and I broke up, that house would still be mine. So but if you're a couple and one person's putting in all the money, you might consider incorporating. You might even consider incorporating if you're not a couple and you're a family, and you might have tax benefits as a result of incorporating. You definitely want to engage a CPA. You might say, well, can I give my girlfriend or my boyfriend, because it's my money, a percentage of ownership? And you can do that on the onset and tell title that she's going to have 30%. I'm going to own 70%. So all different ways. And the other thing is, would you put a house in a trust if you weren't married and you didn't hold it as community property? Because if you're not married and you are both on title, it is now community property. And what community property means, you both own it 50%. Just an FYI there. Whoops, sorry about that. So clarifying ownership is one of the first things I would ask when we met. And you are in a relationship and both of you have a criteria. because I think a good realtor is going to engage you. I can't tell you how to hold title, but I think it's important that we talk about it. What do you think?
Yeah, so this is one of those things that when you're first looking, you probably want to discuss how you're going to be holding title at the very beginning. You don't want to be having this conversation as you're about to sign on the dotted line and then chat with Darcy. That's when things can get very ugly, because by then you've spent 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months with your own assumptions just to find out that your assumption is different than the other person's, okay? So when you first start looking, you want to sit down and have a conversation about, are we both going to be on the title? And how does that look, right? Or if one person is the only one getting on the mortgage, then you still want to find out, hey, so I'm planning on buying a house. I'm the only one that's going to be on the mortgage. So how about I put my name in the title? It basically means I'm going to be the only one that owns the house. Is that okay? Right? Or whatever your situation is, whatever your comfort level is. You also need to consider when you get money from parents. It frequently happens that couples get money from parents. So the parents give them, say, $50,000, $100,000, and they're like, great, wonderful. They put it into the house, never think again about it until they get a divorce. And suddenly that money is an issue. When they're having mediation, typically one side is like, you know what? I know it's like community property, it's 50-50, but I want my $100,000 back because it came from my parents. And so then it becomes contentious. Now, in some cases, the other side says, that's totally fine. It's your parents. I'm okay with that. And in some cases, it's not okay with the other person. They're saying, no, I'm not okay with this and I'm not going to agree. And so to avoid that, you want to have the conversation. When you get that, you need to have that business conversation about, if this business relationship were to deteriorate, can I keep this money? Can I get this money back out when we sell the house? So these are really good conversations to have. You can write something up to, write down what it is that you've agreed upon. But these are the things that do tear people up down the road. And so it's really important to address them early on, even if it might feel uncomfortable, because you're used to being in a romantic relationship and now you have to talk about business. But if you couch the entire relationship as, this is a business relationship, and you keep it separate from your romantic relationship, it's going to be a lot easier than if you sort of just blend the two together. So you just need to take off your hat and put your business hat on and say, what would happen if this business dissolved? Will you get your $100,000 back out? Or are we counting this as community property and we're just going to split it 50-50? So please consider having these hard conversations early on.
Exactly. So, investment property post shelter in place, rentals versus single family home. Landlords are in a tricky situation. So let's just stop for a second. A lot of financial planners will say a single family home that is your primary residence is not an investment property. And what is very true is that you're going to be paying rent or a mortgage somewhere. And this is, the roof over your head is not investment property, it's a family home. But the longer you live in a home, the smaller your mortgage gets. So the reality is down the line, and this, I did want to say this too, it's okay to sell property. Like people like, oh, I can't sell my single family home. Like, yes, you can. It might be great for 3 years, or that single family home that you buy now as a starter home in 2 years becomes a rental because you've made more money. And the house that you've grown out of now is going to be a place where you can get a really good rental income from. So in my mind, when you jump into buying your first home, or even if you're downsizing, you have a great house, but now it's just kind of you. And what's a great place to live? And it's like, well, maybe you shouldn't sell that condo that you're living in. Maybe that single family home in San Francisco, or that house that you're living in, maybe that should be a rental. Maybe there's passive income that is going to make you feel really good that you're going to be getting every month. So to me, everything is a business transaction. Everything is up for grabs as an investment. I talked a little bit about all of this and making the numbers work. That is at the core of people feeling comfortable, people feeling safe, and the whole family doing well. Because one thing you don't want to be is house rich, life poor. I don't even remember what that saying is. But I will say one thing, that I moved up from Silicon Valley 4.5 years ago back to the North Bay. And it's expensive down there. And many people were, were house heavy, so that their fund money, their, like just money to discretionary income to go out and do things was kind of limited. So, it's something that you want to consider. Any thought on this, Alice?
Yeah, I wanted to also bring up earlier when talking about if you're going to be investing in property, and let's say you have an idea that you want to buy this farmhouse and you want to rent it out for, I don't know, events or people who have retreats, something like this, whatever idea you might have. It's also really important for both sides to talk about the details of that instead of just having just the dream, to actually say, okay, who's going to, if you're buying it out in the middle in Kentucky, right? And you live in California. So you don't want to just say, this is my dream, let's buy it, it's for sale, my family's putting it up for sale, and so I want to get it because this is my dream. You really need to talk about, how are you going to make that dream come true? Like, are you going to be flying back and forth? Are you going to be getting a property manager? Are you going to be managing the property manager? What does all of it look like? You really need to dig into the details. Else you find yourself with a property, you haven't thought through the details, and it's too late because you already purchased it, right? So you really want to ask your partner, how are you going to manage it? Are you planning on flying back and forth? Are we going to have more expenses because you're going to be purchasing plane tickets multiple times a year to go back over there? Are you going to have to find contractors to work with? Are you going to be overseeing it? Are you going to be staying there for 6 weeks at a time while they're renovating it? All of these different things are really important questions that you need to ask the other person or ask yourself when you have a dream. Do not just buy something and saying, this is my dream and I imagine it, it's great. You really have to think about, what is it going to take to get there? And is it feasible for you and your lifestyle?
I think the other thing too, that's really important, because a lot of people, I know it's going to be hard to people to really, a lot of people impulse buy real estate. If they can, they do. And there is a certain level of risk to every investment. And this is the thing that I think is at the core of some of the issues, is not everyone has the same risk tolerance. And one thing that I say to people is, you're going to have, we are creatures of comfort, and we're going to have a roof over our head no matter what. Just a matter of where that money is going to have a roof over our head. So, if you're looking at an investment property or just a single family home because you want to branch out or you need more space, really the concept is are you buying just for comfort, or are you looking for an under market? Everyone wants something under market, but what comes with under market? Do you want to fix it? Are you willing to fix it up? What level of risk are you willing to take if this needs some work, and once you start, you don't know what's going to happen when you expose some walls? I mean, there's all sorts of conversations that really could be teased out. And I really enjoy helping people with those nuts and bolts when we're looking at property. But that actually should start right from the beginning. So we're going to open it up to questions. Anyone, we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to, what are you thinking? You just can, if you're muted, you can unmute yourself. So anyway, I say, build your team. And I just love having a team around me. I'd say a financial planner, a CPA, a certified, public accountant, a really good realtor that you feel really good about, that knows investments and understands numbers, a great lender that can think out of the box and maybe get you a loan that's not just a 30-year fix, but something a little bit a little bit easier, where your monthly payment isn't like an ARM loan, where your monthly isn't as high. That might get you in. You might be able to refinance later. And then of course, a mediator. Questions on that? Okay, Alice?
Yeah, so, we also have understanding your personal issues is really important. Facilitated meetings are very important if you're unable to get through them on your own. But really, I want to emphasize that you should be asking difficult questions. I think it does make it easier to manage the conversations if you set parameters saying, okay, it's my understanding that we're going to business together because we're going to be signing paperwork where both of our names are on there, and one of us or both of us is going to be financially responsible. So those are the times that, so if you frame it that way, it's easier because then you can come into the meeting and you can come in as a business partner. And so the conversations can be more as a business partner as opposed to a spouse or a partner, right? And so you can face those difficult conversations a little bit more easily, particularly when you're talking about, okay, so in the event that, the business does fall apart, how are we going to resolve it? So you don't really have to say stuff like, if we get a divorce or if our marriage falls apart. You can just use it as like, if the business falls apart, if we decide not to be in business together in the future, how do we handle it? So that really takes the emotion out of it, and it helps you think, because if someone says, well, if we get a divorce, I want my $100,000 back, it's going to flare up emotions in the other side. And once the emotions come up, your thinking side of your brain starts to shut down. And it's very difficult to make decisions or have conversations when you're in that state. It's a little bit easier to manage it if you just frame it in a way that like, hey, if we're in business together and we decide to not be in business together anymore, what's going to happen? Then you can kind of remove the emotions out of it. So it's a really good way to frame the conversations.
Yeah. I think the one thing that I would say is, and I'm trying to put myself in the position of, because I've been doing real estate for a long time, not knowing what to ask. So I wanted to just address that for a moment. You're in a new marriage, or you're a couple, or you're an empty nester, or you're getting ready to retire, or you have kids, and you really need to talk to your kids about selling, your house. What questions might you ask? How do you begin? And there are several layers of questions. One is, this is a business. How do you feel about me selling? How do you feel about, moving on? And, when you think of moving, what do you think of? That would be a great just opening conversation. When it gets down to how are we going to hold title, or what do you want? What's your long-term and short-term goals? And things get sticky. I think it's helpful to take a breath and do it in stages. And I mean it, like, keep a notebook, like, okay, we're going to talk about these topics, and let's just talk about long-term, short-term goals tonight. Let's talk about what kind of property we might want to hold. I get a lot of calls. What's trending right now, in case anyone's interested, is multi-use buildings. Okay, right? We live upstairs. We have commercial downstairs. And I do have kind of an interest in that myself, but when you enter into a business like a multi-unit building, or let's say a 2-unit in San Francisco, where you live in one, like a duplex, how does that look? Is that going to be okay? Are we both going to feel good sharing a wall with our tenants? Those are questions that are really like, let's just sit down and feel into that together, and then listen to each other and know how it feels. But in terms of holding title, what does a property mean? I would really recommend calling your realtor, or you can call me, even if you don't think I might be your realtor. I'm happy to answer any questions or help you through that.
And I want to mention, oh, Anna, did you have a question?
I have a comment that I really appreciate all the information and the examples and the conversation about having it be like a business, and all the things that you would be thinking about and questions asking. They're so important, and like you were saying, people don't always think about those questions. And so I'm single. My husband passed away a while ago, and I would love to have somebody else in my life, another man. And so this is just bringing forward to me. It's like, oh, so if that man comes into my life, then we may be sharing property, or I don't know, and he would have family. And so it's all these, you're just really planting a lot of seeds for me. And I really, really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The other thing that is really important, and I say this because I see this in divorce all the time, is that if people are going to be putting different amounts of money into community property, and then they go through a mediation, community property says, okay, it's 50-50, but sometimes they go through mediation and they kind of want to split it up a little bit more equitably based on what they put into it. So let's say one partner says, I'm going to put the money my parents gave me into the down payment. And the other partner says, that's great. What I will do is I'll pay the mortgage. So then they pay 10 years of mortgage, and then they get into a place where they want to get a divorce. Now they don't want to go through mediation and split it 50-50 because they don't feel like it's 50-50. At the same time, they don't really have good accounting of who put how much money in. They just know that one person's been paying for 10 years, but they have no idea what that means, how much that equates with. And there's also situations where people get a divorce and they keep the house. One person continues to live in the house and because of the children, and they say, we'll sell the house in 5 or 10 years. Well, guess what? You still need to figure out today how you're going to divide things up when you sell the house in 10 years, because one person is paying the mortgage, the other person is not. One person is paying for the house, the maintenance of the house, which could be tens of thousands of dollars at the end of 10 years. Another person's like, oh, well, but I put in the down payment, and all of that accounting is a mess. Why? Because they did not go into it thinking that it was a business partnership. They went into it thinking, hey, we're just here to help each other out. As a matter of fact, there was one person who even said, oh, home maintenance, I'm not going to worry about a budget. We get along really well. It's fine. We'll just figure things out. Until I said, well, then if that's the case, are you planning on splitting everything 50-50? And they were not in agreement. One person said yes, and the other person said, no, I don't think that should be 50-50. So these are the places where you don't want to end up. You want to start from the beginning, thinking of it as a business relationship. If one person is paying the mortgage, you want to make sure you keep a spreadsheet of like all the mortgage payments. So at the end of the road, if you do have to break that partnership up, you have an accounting of how much money each person has put into it, so that if you were to mediate it and come up with a fair and equitable settlement between the two of you, you can understand how it's fair instead of having a big mess of accounting and not knowing how to actually divide it up, in which case both parties can end up being very bitter and upset.
Yeah. And then, you add the kids in there too, but also houses build equity. That's the thing. I mean, I want to say that if you're on the call and you have a house and you have like 200,000 or 300,000 sitting in your house in equity, which is exactly my story. I always had this, don't spend a cent of your money in your house. And it occurred to me recently, it's like, wait a minute, I have a lot of equity in this house, and might I want to do something with that equity? So a house is not just the amount you paid for it 10 years ago. It's now 15 years later, and there's 500,000 sitting in this house. And one person, you may have gotten divorced 7 years, and then they paid the mortgage, which was quite low, not even market rate really, because the mortgage has gone down and as time has gone on. But there's a heck of a lot of equity sitting there when you go to sell. So these are all questions. But I really want to say it's really good to get grounded in reality. Like a realtor can tell you exactly what the comps are, what your house is worth, what your family property that you just inherited is worth, what it would look like for rental income. I mean, there's a lot of that you may not be able to answer, but people will help you answer those questions. Any other questions?
I just kind of wanted to comment a little bit on what you guys are talking about. As a financial professional, dealing as a financial advisor, it is important for people to understand that if you're planning to use your real estate as a retirement, a cash cow, or anything in the future, a divorce can pretty much demise that plan, because now you're splitting assets into two. So right. This information right here for people to understand and fully acknowledge that what you're building right now will have holes if you don't prevent by creating a hedge or a nice plan. It's very important for people to understand the importance of this subject alone, especially for couples.
Yeah,
Thank you, Rico.
absolutely.
Very true.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say this, that for all my investment clients, the first thing I ask them is, do you have a financial planner? And the reason why I ask them that is because owning real estate is one, I would say almost every financial planner I know is, the first thing they say is, well, are you diversified enough? It's like, that is not the only thing you're going to invest in. And it shouldn't be. I think, and it's not a realtor is not a financial planner. We just help you buy and sell real estate. But planning your future and your goals around your money, absolutely, that falls into the category of, you need to be working with a financial planner, and a good financial planner will tell you need to be working with a CPA. So,
Correct.
you know, it's a beautiful partnership is your CPA, your realtor, and your financial planner. And they all play very, very different roles. And we can talk to each other. If you give us permission, we can all help, you know, like elevate your financial status so that you're living exactly how you want to live as time goes on. So I love this quote. Alice, you can read it because you found it, and I love it so much.
Honest, open communication is the only street that leads us into the real world. We then begin to grow as never before. And once we are on this road, happiness cannot be far away.
So thank you very much. We're doing another talk on August 11th, and this is managing a family inheritance. We're going to be working with families who have property, who have siblings that they may be a little bit stuck with. You might also be just one person with a parent that's aging and, you know, has a property, and how to handle taking care of that parent and their property. But it's going to be with Alice and myself, and we will be sending an invite again.
Thank you. On behalf of Darcy and myself, I want to thank all of you for attending, and hopefully you found this to be useful information, and we hope that you come to the next workshop that we're having.
Yeah, and take our numbers down because we'd love to talk to you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great evening. Thanks
You
a lot.
too.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.